Greetings, everybody. We are very excited to welcome you all to the Reimagine Innovation session, Delivering Freshness Coast to Coast, hosted by Americold. My name is Amanda Griffin, and I'm Vice President of Education and Program Management here at United Fresh. Now, before we begin, I do have a few Zoom logistics to review that I'm sure you're all very intimately familiar with at this point. As you can see, we're all in Zoom meeting, so you all have the ability to turn your cameras on and off, as well as mute and unmute yourselves. So feel free to keep your cameras on so that we can see your faces, but stay on mute so that we don't receive any background noise. We welcome any questions that you may have throughout this presentation. Just type them into the chat pod at the bottom of the screen, and we will actually ask them in a timely fashion as you ask them to us. So we won't hold them till the end. So ask them as you have them. We will also take questions at the end as well. And last but not least, this session is being recorded, and we will send out the recording in the near future. So thank you again to Americold for hosting this session. Americold is based in Atlanta, Georgia, and owns and operates 246 temperature-controlled warehouses with over 1.4 billion refrigerated cubic feet of storage space in fruit and vegetable growing regions around the world. More than 170 of those facilities are in North America, with most of the key U.S. ports covered. With a specialist services and capabilities aimed at supporting fruit and vegetable supply chains specifically, Americold's subject matter experts can be consultants to you on your logistics strategies. Now I'm going to hand things off to Chris Ryan and Brian Kastick, two of Americold's fruit and vegetable supply chain subject matter experts, for self-introductions in today's presentation. Chris and Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And thank you to United Fresh for hosting us today. So my name is Chris Ryan. I'm a director of business development and key accounts. So I have customers across North America that I do business with, and happy to have some of our customers on the line today. So I've been in the industry for over 13 years now, mostly in customs brokerage, freight forwarding, international logistics, warehouse, and transportation. So I'll then hand it over to my colleague, Brian Kastick.
My name is Brian Kastick. My background is I'm a grower shipper. I've done growing programs in Peru, Chile, Mexico, all over the United States. And I developed a facility called Port Fresh Logistics in Savannah, Georgia, which was purchased by Americold. And I joined the team, and like Chris, I'm a director of business key accounts, and I specialize in produce accounts and consulting on import-related matters.
Great, thanks, Brian. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. So this is our the title page. So the whole theme of this PowerPoint presentation and today's talk is about delivering freshness from coast to coast. We just, first slide, we wanted to talk about the current situation of how the supply chain and logistics operations are set up on an international level. So at the top, you can kind of see a visualization of how it gets from the field all the way till it gets to everyone's retail distribution and wholesale operations. So at the top, you can see it starts off at the field. That's the grower, shipper, and farmers, where they're harvesting all their goods. Then they're sending it to their packing sheds to be then transported to a consolidation warehouse where those pallets will be loaded into container, shipping containers, and then loaded onto ocean vessels or loaded onto airplanes and taken into the port. That's then, really where we come in and pick up our products. We do the drayage from the port to our facility. We would then do any sort of treatments, and as far as import regulations would be concerned, with cold treatment or fumigation, and then trucking it from our facilities to the different DCs and wholesale operations. And then from there, then that gets distributed out to the final customer, which is us as individuals and consumers. So really, what the needs are is that everyone wants to have their produce as fresh as possible and as pleasing as possible to the consumers when they're purchasing it. What we found is that there's a lot of hands that go into getting food from the time that it gets harvested in at the country of origin until it gets onto your plate. And through handling that product, there's every single time that it's picked up, there's potential for that product to get damaged or go bad. So we want to talk about how are we going to minimize that. There's also a lot of talk in the industry that's very real about how inland transportation costs are through the roof. There's also not enough drivers to get product from point A to point B. So how do we remedy that and get products to our consumers as quickly as possible? Also, shippers are looking to have their stock as close to their end customers as possible. So how do we go ahead and set up infrastructure to make that happen? There's also time is of the essence, especially with fresh produce, and in today's environment, consumers want to get product in consumer packages and put it into pleasing formats at retail. So how do we get enough time to do that and get the product as fresh as possible to the consumer? And with all the activities that take place in the supply chain, the total time that it takes to do it is a lot, and you also have a lot of costs involved. Is there anything, Brian, you would want to add to this?
I think the other thing is, if you look at the current situation, there's a lot of players involved, both in the country of origin and in the U.S. on the import side. One of the changes we see coming in the future in the supply chain is less players being involved. So that's why you see, people investing in assets both on the ports in the foreign countries, country of origin, and the receiving port. The other thing is, if you look at the traditional sales mechanisms of produce, traditionally you have your grower shipper working with a U.S.-based importer, and that U.S.-based importers handle logistics, handle the sales and the marketing. We see a future trend where those organizations on the shipper side and the importer side merge together and either become vertically integrated, or the grower and shipper in South America has more of a sales agent model where there's less control by the U.S. agents. So we see a flattening of the supply chain and less parties involved, because with all these parties involved, the overall end selling price of produce has not changed significantly in 10 years. And while you have seasonal peaks and seasonal valleys, if you look overall at the trend across a broad basket of commodities, the prices have not increased significantly. But if you look at the price of petroleum, the price of agrochemicals, the price of seed, the price of labor, everything's gone up. So you've got all this compression on margin. And so you have to do something to flatten those costs. So we see a lot more vertical integration and trying to help customers at both in the country of origin all the way through to the end supply chain to take cost out of the overall structure, time, and the challenges of getting all these different organizations to work together.
Good stuff, Brian. That was good insight. Also, too, I kind of want to hit on the labor aspect of it too. We've seen labor issues across the board as far as not being able to get enough people in to take care of everything that needs to happen. That's from drivers to packers, and general warehousemen. So that is another obstacle that needs to be addressed, and hopefully we'll see that in the next coming months. So I'll go to the next slide and talk a little bit about where are there opportunities for us to enhance the supply chain and take out, you know, any sort of roadblocks to make the supply chain more efficient and get products quicker to market as possible. So one of the things that we've done is, you know, start to put in infrastructure at the country of origin to do consolidation work, you know, near the ports, to do, you know, packing of containers for export. So, you know, farmers, shippers can bring their products to us. You know, we'll palletize products and, you know, get it ready for export and stuff the containers there. So that's one of the enhancement opportunities that, you know, shippers and importers can take a look at. Another thing that we've also worked with retailers on is setting up a multi-vendor consolidation type program to help with making sure that their transportation models are running as efficiently as possible and they're utilizing the trucks to their maximum capacity. One other thing too that has recently popped up is leveraging forward distribution. So getting product from, you know, the farms and packing houses out to infrastructure where you can, you know, hold the product for, you know, up to a week and then, you know, transport that product to the stores that are, you know, closer to that warehouse, instead of having to set up multi-stop transportation, you know, where you might be waiting for a long time to get unloaded at a particular warehouse, and it really slows down the truck and can lead to issues there.
You know, and we look at the challenge our customers are facing. It's really in two particular lanes. It's West Coast to the Northeast in summer season, and then it's Mexican border to the Northeast and the Southeast in the winter and fall season. And so we really think that forward distribution offers a model for people to leverage TL pricing, have product on hand, and minimize overall cost. But particularly in those summer months, you know, this year we were seeing truck rates $8,000 to $12,000 on full truck rates from California to New York, and that's crazy. And unfortunately, it looks like there's no real solution to replace the Cold Connect. And that was a great service. I don't know if some of you utilized it, but that was a great service from the West Coast to the East Coast with that LTL delivery at the end. But that business model is gone, and the rail services have no real incentive to recreate that or allow that model to be recreated. So right now, forward distribution offers, you know, individual retailers or grower shippers opportunity to, you know, recreate their own Cold Connect on a smaller basis.
That's a good point. And, you know, it allows grower shippers to, you know, use us or, you know, use anybody for repacking of their products. You know, if there's limited capacity on repacking at the you know, customer source, if you get it to us or, you know, whoever to repack for you, you'll have less rejections at the time that you're, you know, sending your product to the retailer. That's another, you know, forward distribution you know, model that you might want to take a look at. So as far as here in the United States, you know, what a service provider should be looking at providing to these customers would be integrating all the activities that are needed to do everything all in one stop. So from the time that it gets to the port, picking up the containers on assets, using gen sets that are owned by the company, so that you're not relying on seam lines, because we've just seen throughout the years that genset issue has always been a problem, that there's not enough to service the trade in an expedient fashion, and that slows down your supply chain. So you want to have a service provider that has their own assets and can provide you with gensets. Also, another critical service to provide is cold treatment. So there's certain commodities and countries of origin that require you to put these products under a cold treatment protocol, and that's to eradicate any pests or noxious weeds that might transit along, on your import side. Same thing with fumigation. So fumigation is another way to eradicate certain pests, and it's also a USDA approved treatment for medfly, which is prevalent in South American countries.
Chris, this is Amanda. I'm popping in for you real quick to say we did get a question coming in from Brendan. The question is, what do you think will happen to FTL rates during Q4 2021 and Q1 2022? We experienced very high rates during spring, early summer months.
They're not coming down. I mean, it might not peak as much as they did at that time period, but there's no reason to believe that the rates are going to go back to where they were in 2020 when it was a buyer's market for transportation. There's a driver shortage, and if you look at the Southeast market on any given day, there might be 300 outbound transportation loads posted for every truck available. So the rates are just not coming down, and so people need to plan accordingly to maximize their transportation, queue utilization, maximize how they position their inventory. But it's, there's no good solutions right now.
All right, thanks.
That's a cheery answer, but unfortunately the rates just aren't going anywhere.
Yeah, but it's the real answer, so.
And even on the drayage side, I'd say in some of the sub-segments of transportation, on the drayage side, you're going to see rates go to places they haven't been before, because there's congestion in the ports. It's very aggravating for a drayage driver to work. They can't get enough turns to make the money they want, so the rates have to go up to keep them at the same place they were income-wise. So you're going to see drayage rates go from levels they are now, but 30 to 40% higher would not be, not be unlikely in the Philadelphia, New York metro ports, and in Los Angeles, God knows.
So, one of the things that we've done in here and locally in Philadelphia is work with the terminals to negotiate for weekend and night hours to pick up containers from the port. So that's helped with alleviating traffic during the daytime. I agree with you, Brian. I think across the other parts of the country, it's still going to be very difficult to get containers in and out of the terminals in the next couple of quarters. So, a lot of you can just see in LA Long Beach, there's 30 vessels right now that are waiting for berths to get in, and it's just an untenable situation, and it's not going to alleviate anytime soon. So, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but Amanda, was there any other questions at this time?
Nope, no questions.
Okay, all right, great. I'll just keep on going.
I do want to throw one suggestion out there for those retailers, those members here that do manage their own import programs. To the extent you could manage with your dray provider to do street turns, which is to turn the container into the facility and minimize the an extra move, that could reduce your cost, but it could also increase your speed of getting your product out of the port. So, and it's different in every port, it's different with every shipping company, but you might want to look with your drayage provider in that market if you can reutilize that container for an outbound load, and that way it can turn at the facility or turn outside the port, allowing you to have lower costs and quicker turns of your goods. Not everyone does that, not every shipping company does it, but if you can find that opportunity, it really works effectively to reduce your costs.
That's a good point. So I'll keep on going with this part of the presentation. So another value-added service that retailers should be looking at is how do we get our product ripened to the specific way that our consumers want to purchase the product at retail or wholesale. So ripening services using ethylene is a service that you should be looking at. We've had experience in handling bananas, avocados, mangoes, doing deep greening on citrus. So those are the different types of commodities that you could look at in having a ripening type program. Also, doing the QC inspections and any AMS grading that would be required by USDA is another thing that you should be looking at when you're looking at service providers.
And there's a cost thing here that's important. For different commodities, there's different conditions of entry. One thing that you really want to look for is, can you do your U.S. Customs agriculture inspections outside of the port environment? The reason you want to do so is if you do your customs work inside the port, you get charged a premium, and you get charged for the moves within the port. And so it could cost you upwards of $1,000 for that container for that inspection. Whereas if you could do it at the facility and it's designated a container examination station, those costs will be much lower.
Yeah, for sure. And also you're cutting out moves as well. So, you can just do everything all in one spot. That's to your advantage. Same thing with repacking the product as well. So if you're looking at doing consumer bags or any sort of type of clamshelling or putting in any other type of packaging, you want to have make sure that your service provider can do that and has the capacity and willingness to do that repack. Another thing that you should look at is also ensuring that your service provider has transportation in place and can provide you with a forward distribution type model to get your product closer to the end user. And also doing consolidation for that transportation move and doing what we call an MVC, multi-vendor consolidation type program.
We do have a question here that has come in. And it is a quick question. Does owning transportation assets have a positive or negative effect on transportation pricing?
Well, I think that owning your own assets allows you a lot more flexibility as to moving those assets where you need them to be to serve a particular client or market at the time that it's needed. So, there's obviously gives and takes on owning your own assets or being a broker type transportation provider.
In this environment, for many years, you need to own your own assets. You could just broker what you wanted. There's always capacity. In this capacity constrained environment, having your own assets is vital because without your own assets, you don't know if you're going to get your stuff covered. By having your own assets, you can guarantee you've got coverage and capacity. Because if you depend on someone else and they're booked out, they're booked out. With your own assets, you know what you have. And that's really important. And it's not just the tractor and the power units, it's also the chassis. You have to have, a good ratio would be 3 chassis to every power unit. But by having your own assets, you can manage your flow, you can manage your customer's flow, and you could help plan. But without your own assets, you're really at the mercy of what everyone else is doing that day. If they got capacity, you'll get it. If they don't have capacity, well then, not going to be a good day.
Great. And we did get one more question that came in while I'm on a roll here. I'm going to keep going. This is specific to Americold. Does Americold manufacture their own fans for the cold storage? If not, what is the onboarding process for potential vendors?
Americold does not manufacture any refrigeration equipment. We do have a big team of engineers that helps procure the stuff for every building that we build or construct, and they work with the vendors through the bidding process. But we don't manufacture any refrigeration equipment. If you want to be a potential vendor, if you could contact Chris or I offline, we could put you in contact with the right person at Americold for that kind of supply presentation.
Great, that's it for questions right now.
All right, great. Thank you, Amanda. So the next slide is just to have an overview of the facilities that we operate and how we go about doing our operations. So you can see here highlighted in orange our drayage and transportation operation. We have the inbounding side and where we do our cross docking of pallets, and so we can stage product to go out on certain lanes and certain trucks and make it as efficient as possible. For doing treatments at the facilities, we offer cold treatment and fumigations in certain areas of the facility, which are USDA certified. So your product can be treated and certified to be entered in commerce.
But the overall point is it's a one-stop shop. What we're trying to do, both in this country and in the country of origin, is offer our customers a one-stop shop, so you can go to one provider for all the things you need to do to that fruit to get it into the country and off to wherever you want it to go. Whether it's the retail channel, the wholesale channel, food service channel, go get on its merry way. But we want to have that one place where you get everything you need done in one facility. And that's really what we've been working on. So, it requires a special license and permit for, cold treatment. So, Americold, through the facility I developed, we had the first cold treatment certified facility in the Southeast, outside of Philadelphia. And that took 6 years of work to get that certification. So we spent a lot of time and effort and money as an organization to get those certifications. We also work to open up ports of entry for other commodities. So we worked diligently to get South African citrus available for Southeast ports. We worked to get the cold treatment pilot project removed and allow equal access to different products across ports. So as an organization, we've done a lot of work behind the scenes, not just for ourselves, but for the industry, to open up the ports to a broader basket of commodities. Because the first point made is the best place for your fruit to be is as close to your end customer as it could possibly be. So if you're in the Southeast, that needs to come through Savannah. If you're in, the Texas, central part of the country, needs to go through Houston. If you're in the West Coast, needs to go through Los Angeles. But getting that product in as close to proximity as you can, to reduce as much cost out of the supply chain as you can, is really the goal. So we want to make all our facilities this one-stop shop type of entry place.
This actually, I was just going to say, we have a question that came in just along these lines about Houston in particular. So there have been significant bottlenecks and delays in Houston, even pre-COVID. Some importers are considering Houston versus other ports to be closer to the end customer or avoid delays in West Coast ports. What is being done to improve processes in Houston to be more efficient?
Houston, if you look at the port development, the produce industry really started heavily in LA and Philadelphia, are the two hubs of the industry. You've got that hub in South Florida for Central American melons and asparagus and air freight. But really, Houston and Savannah were the two next ports to open up. Savannah had the advantage of having a port and a lot of emphasis behind it to open up that whole marketplace in Savannah. Houston's now doing the same thing, but it's really an underserved market. We're working to develop our assets there as well as other people. It's the last of the underserved ports. And it takes a lot. It's not just having a facility. You have to have the customs community, the port, the USDA, the people that do the cold treatment verification on the port. There's a lot of moving parts that have to go together to open up a facility and make it good for commerce. But there's a lot of emphasis on Houston because everyone realizes, you've got H-E-B, you've got Kroger, you've got Brookshire, you've got Walmart, you've got Costco, you've got all these people in the middle of the country that like to eat, and they need that as the port of entry because it makes sense. And so there's a lot of effort going in there. And I would say in the next 36 to 48 months, you'll see Houston be where Savannah is today. But it's not just having a built-in, it's not just having the port. There's a lot of other actors that have to be involved, and they all have to work together. Because if they don't, then it doesn't move smoothly. But there's a lot of emphasis there because everyone realizes that it just makes sense to have Houston be a hub. And there's a lot of costs that could be taken out if you could come into Houston. I always make the plug for Savannah. You can serve the Texas market in 14 hours of truck ride, but Houston makes a lot more sense. It's just, not quite there yet. And it's more than there's other things that have to happen.
Port Authority of Houston also did set up a roundtable for perishable shippers and importers. That has kind of, gone away since, due to COVID, people weren't able to travel and get together as much as they'd like to. So I'll personally reach out to the Port Authority and see if we can get that started back up again, because I think it was on a good trajectory at the time, and then things kind of slowed. Good question. So I appreciate that coming through. So yeah, so this slide, like Brian said, is just to show, you really need to have everything under one roof so that you're minimizing the amount of moves that you have to make that product go through, and also reducing the amount of service providers that touch the product. Here's another slide just talking a little bit more about the value-added services that are in the building, especially in Philadelphia and Vineland. So the facility is 45 minutes from the port gate, so it's very close. A short trip down 55. Having your own assets with your own chassis and overweight permits and own gen sets allow you to have a lot greater control over your destiny and making sure that you get that container out and turned as soon as possible. Also, what you should consider is also participating in a drop trailer program, which allows you to flex product coming into the facility and using your labor as much as possible at times when it might otherwise be underutilized. Also, when products coming in that needs to get fumigated, you also want to make sure that your product gets pre-cooled afterwards, get the temperature back down and ensure freshness of your product, and to make sure that you also don't break the cold chain and keep it at the temperature that is optimal for your product.
I would tell you out there, for those people on the line that actually own your own facilities or operate your own DCs, there's a product called the Jet Ready Fan. If you Google that name, it'll come up, and obviously we have nothing to do with them, but it's the greatest piece of gear since sliced bread. It's great for pre-cooling, very easy to use. You can move with a forklift, and it's like the equivalent of having a jet aircraft engine on a frame. And you can really pre-cool stuff. So even in your own warehouse, outside of a port environment, outside of a 3PL environment, it could really help you out. If you got a load that comes in, this is a little bit off temperature, in 1 or 2 hours, you could bring it back down to temperature very easily. And if you've got those kind of perishable things, whether it's asparagus, berries, grapes, things like that, it's not a bad investment to have a few of them on hand. But it's called Jet Ready Fans. So that's my plug for Jet Ready, but a great piece of gear to help you in those kind of situations.
So, thanks, Brian. So another thing too that you might want to consider, like we talked about, is using the ripening rooms to introduce ethylene or any other type of gas to ensure that your product is arriving to the retailer or wholesaler in a preconditioned state so that it's pleasing to the consumer when they're purchasing it. Also ensuring that it's as ripe as you want it to be. Onto the inspection and label and grading portion of the presentation. Like Brian said, you really want to make sure that if you can do a examination off terminal, that you do so because you save time, you save cost, and you also are not breaking the cold chain if you have it coming into the facility, and you're minimizing the amount of moves that you're going to be doing. You also want to make sure that you have the ability to have your own QC people or a AMS officer be able to do gradings for you at the facility. We also have invested quite heavily in automation and optical grading equipment, which allows you to optimize your yield on your specifications of your products. So we'd be happy to show you, how that works, and we actually have a link for the video in Savannah, which shows the grading happening. So that's something to also consider. And then also, repacking and relabeling, which we talked about a little bit further. Private labeling is also a big thing that retailers are looking at to put it in their own, style and own branding. So.
But the other thing, though, is going back to taking costs out of the equation. For those commodities you can bag at the country of origin, unripened avocados, certain types of citrus, those pack styles should be considered, those options should be considered, because the cost of doing it at origin is doing it one time. And you could take, for example, a box of avocados. So you've got a box of avocados, 70-count avocado. You could have it bagged at the country of origin. It comes up your bag. You're only touching the product once. Whereas if it comes up here, it's got to get dumped out, it has to be bagged, there's more handling. But the cost is actually much lower to do it the first time in the country of origin and put it into that box as opposed to repacking it. So thinking through your supply chain, when you have the opportunity to do things in the country of origin, it makes sense to do so because the labor costs are usually less than they are in the US. But more now today than they were 2 years ago, for sure.
And that's especially something that we're looking at the Oregon facilities, that have been acquired by Americold, is, utilizing applications to, ensure that your product can be repacked at origin and arrives in a good fashion. So there's, a couple different companies that offer applications to the produce to make sure that happens. Then the next slide is just kind of highlighting the different types of transportation models that can be looked at to, optimize your network. One would be shuttling from one area to another using a forward distribution model, so taking it from the West Coast into the East Coast, and it drives lower cost, on our transportation models. Another way to look at it would be utilizing a regional LTL and FTL type model, where you're using a refrigerated LTL brokerage service, and on the LTL side, and then as far as full truckloads, using an asset-based truckload service to bring product as close to the end consumer as possible. And then here on the drayage side, we already kind of touched on it. Using a drop trailer program really helps to optimize your warehouse and utilizing your labor in off-peak times. So you can use a yard jockey to bring the trailers, back it in, and when there's an open slot, and that really helps to use your labor more effectively. And also cuts down on any detention charges as well at the site if you're utilizing a drop trailer program, because your drivers won't be charging you for waiting times to get unloaded. Anything, Brian, you want to add on this one?
No, it's just, again, just anything we do to cut costs out of the system. So we need to look at with you as you help find your supply chain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Very good. And then we just wanted to highlight the way that Americold has set up our infrastructure for fresh fruits and vegetables on a port level, and the areas where we see distribution increasing. So the Northeast, our Vineland facility, the Southeast, our Savannah site, which Brian is out of. Then we have our Houston site and our LA Carson site. So and we also do have quite a large network of other cold storage facilities, both refrigerated and frozen. So Amanda gave a great introduction to us and what we do here in the U.S. and Canada, but we also have a network overseas that we're able to provide to our customers and help utilize a global supply chain. So I think that's pretty much it. We also just have our contact information. If you guys have any other questions for us after this presentation, I'd be happy to answer any of that. Here we also have a QR code to a video that we produced that's highlighting the Savannah location and the different value-added services that are provided there. So we encourage you to take a look at that, and if you have any questions, that we'd be happy to answer it afterwards. So.
Well, Chris, I actually do have some that have come in since you were doing your closing remarks, so I can go ahead and ask them now if you want to take some more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. So diving in, what are some of the fruit or vegetable types that you have specialist services for, and what are those specific services?
Sure. So, we handle all different types of commodities. I've seen, the biggest commodities that we handle would be citrus fruits. We do that on a year-round basis, especially in Vineland. But we have all different types of commodities: blueberries, cherries, apples, pears, bananas, pineapples, mangoes, pretty much you name the different type of commodity, we handle it. We do a ton of onions, potatoes. So, Brian, anything else you want to add on?
But the biggest ones are cold treated items, being the cold treated citruses and grapes, and then the grapes that require fumigation. Grapes and citrus are the items we have the most specialization in, followed by the hardware items. Don't do a lot of stuff with asparagus. We handle in the building. We don't do a lot of the, stuff with asparagus. There was a push to do vessel asparagus, but now with the port congestion, that's sort of gone away. But grapes and citrus be our greatest area of specialization.
All right. Okay, one more question that has come in, and reminder to anybody those on the line, if you have any more questions, feel free to type them in now so we can get them over to Brian and Chris. All right, so changing my supply chain vendor or partner could make or break me. Is it really worth the risk?
I would say when you make that change, you put a toe in the water and start with a small project, get comfortable on all the integration aspects, then go whole hog. So in the produce, it'd be like a season. I would take a discrete amount of product, take it through a different port, a different vendor, a different supply chain, make sure it's the right fit for your organization, make sure all the communication is figured out, then your second or third season, then go forward on a broader basis. But, you know, I would, in all supply chains, it's too risky to go one way or the other with gusto. I think you're better off starting with small programs, getting comfortable, learning the strengths and weaknesses of what you're doing, and then jumping onto a broader program.
Wonderful. All right. Well, that's it for questions that we received. Any closing remarks you guys want to share?
We appreciate everyone's time today. I think the most important thing is we're thinking about where we are and where we're going with the produce supply chain is it has to change. We have to drive some cost out of there, because at the end of the day, it goes back to the grower shipper, and the end price that's being paid for the product to the grower shipper has not changed significantly, but all those inputs to production have gone up markedly. So I think you're going to see a real need to change the number of intermediaries throughout the process and flatten out the supply chain in order to preserve the grower shipper base. Because if not, then it's very difficult to, you know, sustain what we're doing. And so I think you'll see a lot of innovation, a lot of different partnerships, and particularly between the country of origin and the end retailer. You know, how that distance between point A and point Z gets covered is going to change a lot in the next 36 to 60 months.
I agree. I just also wanted to say thank you to United Fresh for hosting us today. I agree to Brian as well. I think we're also going to see a lot of automation that is going to need to take place, especially with the labor conditions that we're seeing right now. So any way that we can invest in automation to cut down on the amount of labor that we need, we're going to be doing that. So I think that's another way that, you know, we're looking at how to drive costs out of the supply chain.
Great. Well, listen, guys, I have one more question that came in while you were giving your closing remarks. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it since we still have a little bit more time. Have you had success asking big retailers for price increases as the laundry list of costs have risen, or trying to absorb that until costs, in parentheses, rates, etc., start to come down?
I'm just laughing because, well, if you figure that one out, please share with everybody, because I think everyone in the supply chain would love to know how you get retailers to pay more money. I think supply chain partners are being fair with each other right now, but I think if inflation continues on its current path, I think there'll be a lot of conversations between 3PLs and end retailers on what those costs are and how they can share some of the burden. But right now, I think people are reluctant because they don't know what the real situation is. But the longer we go in the current labor market, those conversations are going to have to occur, because no one can sustain losses at one level of the chain or not. So, but if anyone has the secret code how to have the conversations, I'm sure that Chris and I would love to have it, because that would be a great consulting thing to sell to people.
Amanda, this is John at United. Brian, Chris, thank you so much for all that you've said here today. If I could kind of do a follow-up on that, which is, what do you see the next 5 years? Where do you see things going, right? So the rules have changed. We're trying to still deal with them. I don't know if you have any sense or any thoughts on that, about how the supply chain will deal with what appears to be our new reality.
I think you see two things. I think on the grower shipper side, you can see some consolidation as people try to consolidate to reduce costs and reduce risk. And then on the 3PL side, I think there's a big question out there, and people are trying to figure out, can you utilize one provider in all your locations? Because that's sort of new to the produce industry. The produce industry had been served previously by a lot of small regional players that were big in that one area, but not national players. So I think that's a big question, is can you have one supply chain partner across the network? But I think on the grower shipper side, you're going to see consolidation out of necessity. And then on the transportation side, I think you have to really find your partners on the transportation side that have the assets to keep the drivers, because the capacity constraints are just not going away because people don't want to work.
And I think there's also probably going to be some automation that's probably going to come into place as well, especially with the driver shortage, and that's not going to get any better. So I think we're probably going to see autonomous vehicles start transporting produce, which I think actually there's already been some of that happening, especially with some shippers in California. So I think that'll just continue to increase.
No, and I really appreciate you both bringing that up, and not to extend the discussion here, but obviously we kind of have a once in a lifetime transportation and infrastructure bill here that no one thought could get done, but might actually get done. We've got immigration and labor challenges that haven't been solved since 1986. And so looking forward, it's so helpful to hear from you guys about what you think is going to be the challenges that we're going to deal with.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Yeah. Well, Brian, Chris, and everybody at Americold, thank you guys so much for joining us today and for this great presentation. I know our folks had a ton of questions, and that's always a good sign that you had everybody dialed in and engaged. So thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. A quick reminder that we will be sending out the recording to everybody who has registered for the session. So you will hear from either Americold or United Fresh with that recording. And in the meantime, I hope you guys all have a wonderful day, and we will see you on the line at another session. Thanks.